Welcome back to the podcast. This is episode 120 something. Today, I'm speaking to Yong-Soo Chung about his career from finance to crypto to starting companies to making millions and millions of dollars and how you can do the same. Welcome back to the podcast.
The Alfie Whattam podcast.
Alfie, thanks so much for having me.
My pleasure. So you've got a bit of an interesting background, right? You were in finance, you went to crypto as a dev, and then you started setting up companies from EDC to, now creator type businesses and beyond. Can you just give us a little bit of summary about what you're currently doing? Because you've got the holding company, right? And then that owns a couple of different assets. Just for the people that don't know who you are, just give us the 60-second summary.
Sure. So I started my company in 2015. It's an e-commerce shop selling everyday carry gear. And then a couple of years later, we brought home a French bulldog, and my wife and I, very coincidental, obviously we weren't planning on it, but he went viral on Instagram and gained this huge following. So now I think he's got 126,000 followers on Instagram. And people were asking hey, where can I buy that leash? Where can I buy that harness? And so we launched a dog shop. And because I already had my first e-commerce shop, it was very easy to kind of, the back-end operations is the same. The website obviously is different. The audience very different, but everything else was very similar. And so we had these two companies going. And then the biggest pain point that we had was fulfillment and shipping. And we had a lot of other friends in the e-commerce world coming to us and saying, hey, fulfillment is also such a, pain for us. What are you guys doing? What service are you guys using? And we were like, you know what? Because we had such a problem with our 3PL, third-party logistics company, we actually brought it in-house. And so we do all the fulfillment in-house. And so they were like, can you help us do that? Can you just ship out our items too? And so GrowthJet, which is our climate neutral certified 3PL, launched without a website and without a name. We just had paying clients from the get-go. And so that is our third company. And what's funny is, Alfie, I didn't realize that there was such a thing as a personal holding company until I got on X. And when people were talking about kind of having these multiple companies and managing it with operators in place, I was like, wow, that's literally what I'm doing. And so I got wrapped into the whole PHC. I went down a rabbit hole of personal holding companies. And I realized wow, I have 8 years of experience in PHCs, and people are starting their own PHC right now. And they're trying to figure it out, and all of a sudden I have 8 years worth of experience in this. And so leveraging my experience and I guess just by default I have an authority, I could speak about it. And so it's really interesting how the PHC model and the philosophy just kind of landed on my lap, and I'm wow, I can talk about this very coherently. And so that's kind of how this all went down.
Could you explain the personal holding company to me? Because I have a couple of companies that are all set up as separate entities, right? And I have different people involved in them, but I'm still running them day to day. It kind of sounds like you have general managers almost responsible for the majority of it, and then you're more of, working on the business rather than in the business. But you're in San Fran, right?
Yes, San Francisco.
So I'm in London, so forget the logistics of how it's set up and the type of business, but can you just explain what a personal holding company is and how you manage your operators and that sort of thing?
Absolutely. So this is a great question. So aside from the entity structure, because I think that's more of that's not really, yes, it is important, but I really like the philosophy behind a personal holding company more than the actual legal structure entity, right? So personal holding company, literally, from my eyes, you're setting up a company that serves you as the person. And so what I mean by that is a lot of holding companies in general in the past, holding companies have been around for decades, right? But 99.9% of them are about shareholder value and providing shareholder return on investment, ROI.
Yeah.
And so people invest into holding companies, and then they're looking for the operators of the holding companies to be able to go out there and find the best companies, the highest, margins and the efficient, all these efficient companies that that I don't really care for. For example, a scaffolding company might be really profitable. You go and you got to paint the building, you put up the scaffolding, and you get paid by the hour. And it's very profitable margin wise. But I have no interest in buying or acquiring a scaffolding company because I just don't care about them. And so I wouldn't do that. And so I think the difference between a regular holdco traditionally and a personal holding company is the personal holding company is each person's like own, like essentially like siloed projects that work together as a whole. And I think that's a key component too, because like one company might serve as kind of a cash flow cow for your other companies. And I'll give you an example. Like the French Bulldog company that we have is a really fun thing that my wife and I do. I mean, we go on all these trips together. Like, we get invited to these 5-star hotels. We're going up to Sonoma next month for collaboration with a 5-star hotel. So like these things are, it's more than just money. It's also about like turning hobbies into or turning your hobbies into businesses. And so like that concept, it's almost like a lifestyle business 2.0 in a way, where you've got these different companies set up for your own level of enjoyment, but also like cash flow. And
Yeah.
so holistically, when you look at all the companies in your personal holdco, they all work together as a whole to provide what you need. And each piece doesn't need to be about making money. Like it can be about having fun or whatever. But the whole point is that all of these things collectively work together to serve you as the person.
Okay. Interesting. So just in terms of like the delegation side, because I read, I'm not sure if this is true, but I read that you, at some point, I'm not sure if that's now or in the past, but we're making like 300 grand from maybe all of these or one of them like a month, but by working on each of them very, very like Tim Ferriss style, like an hour a week or an hour every couple of weeks or something like that. Is that right? Is it, like, are you very much, the business is there to serve you rather than the other way around?
That's correct. So I do have one business that is doing it did $3.3 million last year. And that's
Nice.
just one business, right? So I've got
Yeah.
three under this personal company. So this one business, 3.3 million last year, and I have a general manager who I've hired and trained over 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
And so he is very much capable of running the business by himself. And so
Which one is it?
it's the pocket knife business.
Okay.
So
Okay.
everyday carry, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So EDC is like you said earlier, turning hobbies into businesses, and EDC is like, and you mentioned lifestyle. So EDC is like the great example, right? I love EDC. I'm like super minimalist in terms of what I carry, and I could speak to you for hours and hours about this sort of thing. I've gone through every wallet, well, maybe not every wallet, but I've gone through every single thing that you can think of, right, to try and find like the least stressful setup possible when I'm going day to day. Why like EDC and like because that's not the sort of thing that I personally would go, I'm going to start an EDC business, right? Well, how did you get into that?
Yeah. So I was looking at my expenses, and this is something that I urge all of your listeners to do is go through your credit card statements or bank statements and look at where you're spending your money. And like where you're spending your money, it's try to avoid things that are like groceries and things like that. That like it's not like like survival things. Like I get you got to spend money on food and stuff, but I'm talking about like hobby stuff, right? So if you do that, you'll realize that wow, I'm spending a lot of money on I don't know, clothing. Let's say like I'm really into clothing, like different styles and stuff. And then maybe you start content build like writing content on clothing, and then you can expense. I mean, this is tax stuff that maybe not applicable to the UK, but basically you can like there's so many tax advantages you can do. And also it's like you can just go and meet like these brands that you always admire. Like once you get to a certain size, like you'll be invited to their private events, you can meet the designers. I mean, it's like a really cool thing where like you're turning your hobby expenses into like your business. And so I think that is a really cool concept that not a lot of people think like, oh, I got to start a business. Like, oh, it's gonna be something that, I'm interested in, but it's not really gonna be like, I don't know. It's like they don't think outside the box of like what do you actually spend money on, and
Yeah.
can you turn that into a business, right?
So were you spending a lot of money on wallets and like key rings and
Yes,
that sort of thing?
yes, yeah, exactly.
How
Yeah.
did you grow
So
that? Was it like drop shipping, or did you make the products, or what was like the logistics of the business?
yeah, so it started off as a retail shop. So I would partner up with other brands to bring them into the shop. And
Okay.
so I did that on purpose because the capital requirements are much lower. And
Yeah.
so I didn't need to do large runs of inventory. And so each week we do a gear drop. So every Wednesday at 12 p.m. Pacific, things could sell out really fast. It's the drop model.
Okay.
And then each week we iterate based on feedback and how things did the previous week. And then so we hold the inventory at the 3PL company that I have, GrowthJet. And then GrowthJet ships out the items for Urban EDC and Spotted by Humphrey. So yeah.
Are these like Shopify sites now then?
Yes, exactly.
Okay. Such a cool business. I don't really sell any product apart from like some courses, but it's it's certainly something I'm passionate to get into at some point. Yeah. What about like the growth of that? Was that like paid ads and to get it?
Yeah.
Like because you can, if you get a really, really good product, build out a great Shopify site and you put some good paid spend behind it with copy that converts, then you can have that thing just like fly off, to use your kind of your words, right? Is that how you did it?
So what's funny, Alfie, is that I was using Facebook ads to grow, and I remember, it was end of March. Actually, it was the last day of March. This is like 2016 or 2017. But my wife and I were celebrating because we had just cracked $100,000 a month, and it was the highest month that we've ever had. But then Facebook banned us like the next week because we were selling, quote unquote weapons that they would consider these pocket knives weapons. And so we lost like 40% of our revenue. And
Yeah.
it was a shock to us. And so, a lot of people say like double down on what's working. Well,
Yeah.
guess what? When you double down on what's working, you're also exposing yourself. You're essentially putting a lot of eggs in one basket. And when that basket goes away, then you're kind of screwed. And so that's one thing to be mindful of, is like, of course, you can be doubling down on stuff that's working, but be aware that if that's taken away, then you're more screwed than before. And so we grew. So after that happened, we started partnering up with other makers who had audiences. And so essentially the way we grew was through partnerships and collaborations from other people's audiences.
Yeah.
And so that was how we've grown over the last 8 years or so. Like each collaboration and partnership is a little bit bigger than the previous one. So we would always like leverage our previous partnerships to get someone who's a little bigger and more reputable, and then we kind of like climbed our way, and now we can work with pretty much anybody in the industry now. The doors have all opened up. So that takes a long time though.
Yeah. When did you get into the creator stuff? Because I checked out your podcast. Very interesting. Yeah. I've got a couple of questions around it because your editing is unique in a very, very good way. I can tell that you've clearly put a lot of thought into how to make it different to the million other podcasts that everybody and their dad has got, right? Tell us a little bit about the pod.
Yeah, so the podcast is called First Class Founders, and it's essentially a place initially for me to share my learnings and my journey with entrepreneurship. But it's kind of evolved into this thing where now I have other people coming on and they're sharing their journey. But then what's interesting here is that I layer my own commentary and analysis on top of the interview. And so I think this is a really unique and kind of a different selling point, because I thought about all these. Obviously, you mentioned there's millions of podcasts out there now. And the one thing that I have that a lot of people don't have is that I'm actually in the arena, like doing stuff, right? I'm doing stuff.
Yeah,
exactly, Chamath. Yeah. I'm doing stuff where other people maybe just a creator who's not really done a lot, right? But I'm actually an entrepreneur, and approaching 8 figures in annual revenue. So I have authority and an angle and a perspective of how business should be run for my own side. And so what I can do is, once I have an interview with a guest, I'll go back and my producer and I will go through and add a narrative on top where essentially I'm almost like analyzing their perspectives. And I think that is kind of the interesting thing, where it's like sometimes I disagree with them.
Yeah.
But I mean, most of the time I agree, but a lot of times I'll be like, okay, well, this is great for this specific circumstance, but I actually think, for a beginner, this might be better. Like I'll like add that commentary in, which is like, not a lot of people have the experience to just do that, right? So I wanted to make it really unique. So I wanted to provide my own input into it.
Why don't you do video?
Oh, so the video, I want to do video, but the podcast. So if your listeners want, like, if you listen to the episodes, you'll see that it's very highly produced. It's got a lot of sound design. It's cut up. It's almost like an audio documentary,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's
Now
not
that you're
easy
saying
to
it,
do. Yeah,
I get it. Yeah, it would be very hard to video something like that unless it was like Mr. Beast level of effort, to make that really, really pop.
yeah, yeah. Maybe we'll get there. I
Yeah.
want to get to a stage where I can hand over the audio to an amazing video guy, and they create some kind of crazy animation where I don't have to like basically record over again. But I haven't gotten to that level yet. But maybe soon.
It took me probably a decade of making content online in various forms to start seeing like a return from it and start to see like good money from it. What about you? Have you found the creator thing? Obviously you mentioned it was really, really valuable with the e-com model and partnering, perhaps affiliate links and that sort of thing, and sharing audiences and podcasts and newsletters. What about your pod and newsletter? Are you making money from these, or are these kind of there to help
Yeah.
put you in touch with great people to help supplement your other companies, like I basically do? How do you go about that?
It's all of the above. So what I've realized is that a podcast and actually having an audience is the greatest way to meet the coolest people. And it's so funny because I'm actually tonight I got invited to a private dinner tonight at an entrepreneur's house, at his own house. It's a small group of other founders, and like he messaged me like a month ago because he saw my stuff on Personal Holdco, and he was like, "Hey, I never thought about this in this way, but I also have a Personal Holdco," and this is the response that I get a lot. Alfie is like, "Oh, I also have a Personal Holdco, but no one explained it this way,"
Yeah.
and so he thought it was really cool, so he invited me to his house tonight, and so that's an example of like, if I didn't post that, like I would never have opened these doors, right? And so
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
that's a huge component that not a lot of people talk about. In terms of the other stuff, like um, sponsorships, I've definitely started taking on those. And so they're kind of in the works. But long term, though, I want to build a community where I'm selling, well, not selling my own products, but basically I want to create a community where um, I want to build my own network. I want to build a network that I wish I had 8 years ago when I started, and I want to bring people together, and I want that value to be like super, super high. And so like that's something that I'm working on. But I mean, ultimately you just have to be open-minded, because this journey it can take you in ways that you never imagined. I'm sure you probably know already, but you just have to be open-minded to see whatever comes to you, and then have a really good signal to noise kind of like filter, and making sure that the opportunities like actually make sense.
Yeah. No, I definitely agree with that.
This podcast is brought to you by WeLoveAlpha.com. If you're looking to grow and hire and scale your software engineering team in the UK, then go to WeLoveAlpha.com to hire the best software developers on the market. Everything across Java to C# to PHP to Python to React and Angular and mobile and more. Go to WeLoveAlpha.com to hire the best software engineers in the UK now.
What about like in terms of your journey? I'm sidetracking a little bit here, but I mean, there's no agenda to this thing, right? You started in like finance, right? And then you went into crypto as a dev. What do you think about crypto now? I do probably, I'd say 30% of my pods are with Bitcoin people and very successful people who have made tens, if not hundreds of millions from getting on like the right coin early and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But what do you think of? Because was it Ripple you were at?
Yes, Ripple.
Yeah. I remember I bought Ripple in like 2019 or something, maybe even earlier than that. I'm not sure how long it's been out for, but what are your views on like the industry? It seems to have been tarnished a bit, in my opinion, by NFTs and obviously the rug pulls and everything else. Not that there's anything bad with that technology. I think it's got great use cases and applications. I just don't think it's been used in the right way and that sort of thing. But if you see FTX, you see everything that's happened. What are your views on blockchain and crypto and separate things, but I guess more the crypto side?
Yeah, I'm pretty bullish on the whole industry and the technology as a whole. I just feel like the infrastructure isn't in place yet for all this, and everyone's just trying to figure it out right now, including exchanges like FTX. I mean, they got over leveraged and they got crushed, but that's it's partly because there's no regulation. It's a wild wild west. But it's also partly because no one really knows the the ramifications of these things, right? And so like people are still trying to figure it out. And so there's gonna be times where you're gonna get crushed by the markets, rug pulled, whatever. Um, but generally the technology that I see, everything's moving to a ledger, a
Yeah.
blockchain
Yeah.
ledger. And I don't see how that's gonna be slowing down. I do think that the hype of like, oh, I got in this coin super early and now I'm a million. Like, I don't think that's
Gone.
gonna
Yeah.
be.
Do you
Yeah,
think
I think
AI
that's a little
is
bit
stolen
in the
like the
past.
show a little bit? Like, do you think like that's now become the hype? Like, everything with GPT and the new
Oh,
models. And you think it's just kind of put a bit of a bullet in crypto, not killed it, but fatally wounded it, perhaps?
I mean, these things will come and go. I feel like I obviously AI is definitely here to stay. But definitely it's more about like hype versus like actual reality. And so when you look at a thing like AI, like the technology is there and it's gonna be amazing, more amazing 5, 10 years from now. But like everyone is making rappers from ChatGPT right now, and that's like the thing. But like that'll all go like that. 90% of those will die down, right? And
Yeah.
so it, it's really about what's underneath all that. Like what's the infrastructure play here, and then seeing like what transformative companies, transformative technologies can be created out of these. And I feel like honestly, even crypto hasn't it hasn't even reached it. It's not even close to reaching it. Like it's just beginning. And so
Yeah.
I really see blockchain and AI kind of like they're so early. So it's the hype was there and I think it's gonna die down, but it doesn't mean that it's the technology is dying, right? It's going stronger than ever. It's just that people's perception of it might be dying down, but it's not.
Are you using many AI tools day to day, like in your business and I guess just for personal life as well?
I don't use AI that much, although I do. I've started using it more as like a search thing. So
Yeah.
I'll use it more to get information. I find that it's way better if I even for example, like we were trying to look for a dog friendly hike around the
Sure.
Bay Area
Sure.
where I
Sure.
live,
Yeah.
and like instead of doing a Google search, you just ask ChatGPT, and it'll like list out like 10 different things, and then you can be like, actually, those are like too far. Can you look for something that's closer? Like it's crazy. It's a better way of like searching for information. And now with like the image and the file uploading things that are happening,
Crazy.
like
Crazy.
that is insane. So I was literally like yesterday I was experimenting. I like uploaded one of the legal documents that I signed like a while back, and I was like, I uploaded it, and I was like, "Am I allowed to do this?" And it answered. It was like, "Oh yeah, yeah. This legal agreement, doesn't preclude you
Insane.
from doing this." And I'm like,
Wow.
"That's crazy."
Yeah, man.
So
5 years ago, I couldn't have imagined having this conversation, like talking about that actually happening and being available to use today for $19 a month or whatever it is. Yeah.
it's insane. Yeah. So, and this is gonna continue to accelerate. And so imagine like before I had to read a legal document, like a 10-page thing where I'm like trying to decipher like what does this actually mean? But now I can just upload it and be like, all right, this is what I want to know. Like, can you just tell me? And it tells you in like 2 seconds. And so like just things are getting more efficient, right? It's just a matter of like productivity, efficiency, and all that. It's just gonna accelerate.
I've got a Yorkie Jack Russell, like terrier cross thing. So I've definitely done the dog example that you mentioned there.
Yeah, I love using it for these. It's hard to find a good dog friendly
Yeah.
hike,
Yeah.
like a outdoor area. So yeah,
Yeah, especially in London. I mean, San Fran especially as well. But yeah, we picked the worst places to really to do that. But
yeah.
that's cool. But what about habits? Is there anything like in particular? Is a common question that we tend to ask people on the pod. But anything that you have recently been doing or have done perhaps medium long term, which you think has had like a massive impact on your life that you'd recommend others do? could be anything, but is there anything in particular? Because I always see habits as like the building blocks of success. You know, you get enough of those bricks in, you eventually get that wall, right? But what are like the top ones for you?
Yeah. So the first thing so it's funny because I don't even think of them as habits anymore. That's different because I just do them. But I do intermittent fast, so I don't eat my first meal until much later, like 1 p.m.
You do two
And so
meals a day or one meal a day?
yeah, I do 2 meals a day. So I'll do my first meal around like 1 p.m., like a late lunch, and
Yeah.
then I'll do like a 7 p.m. dinner, 6 p.m., 7 p.m. dinner, and then I'll pretty much I won't eat anything 2 hours before I sleep because you don't want your body to be digesting while you're sleeping. And so so basically like I don't eat anything 2 hours before all the way up till 1 p.m. the next day. And then I do take a lot of I obviously try to get a good night's sleep. And then I'll take a lot of I'm really into longevity too, and I don't talk about longevity at all online because it's pretty out there, and I haven't really like basically I'm into it, but I just don't know how to like approach it right now in terms of my like online identity.
Yeah.
But I take a lot of like supplements and things like that I believe in will be. I think longevity is going to be the next huge wave after maybe AI. Um, but but yeah, I take care of myself, and the way I see it is I'm an athlete.
Yeah.
I'm an entrepreneur athlete. Like I have to be in good shape every day because I'm literally like today, Alfie, like I have back-to-back meetings for like 30-minute sessions, six in a row.
Yeah, that's
And
cool.
like
Yeah.
I wouldn't be able to do that if I was tired or I'm not in the best, whatever mental shape. And so I see myself as an athlete, and I'm training my body to be able to do that.
Yeah.
So yeah.
What supplements do you take?
So I take I mean now we're getting really in the deep end, but I take quercetin, fisetin, resveratrol. I take NMN,
Okay.
NMN. I take berberine, which is a good substitute for metformin, which lowers your blood sugar. I take spermidine, which is actually the company that I get the spermidine from is from the UK.
Oh, cool.
And they're the highest quality in my book. But anyways, so there's a lot of like stuff that vitamin ADK. I take omega-3, some basic stuff like that.
That's cool. You take more than me. I take quite a bit, but that's a lot more than me, man. That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about books? Another common question I ask is like anything in particular that stands out to you, which I guess my audience is tech entrepreneurs for the most part. I'd say 99% of people listening are tech founders, leaders, managers, or software engineers. That's basically it. Yeah, mostly in the UK and the States. Any books that they should read that you'd recommend that have helped you?
So anything written by Jim Collins, I'm a huge fan of.
Yeah.
So
Good to Great.
Yeah. Good to Great, Built to Last. All that. I think that what else is important though is that I think it's really important that entrepreneurs read stuff outside their own country. And so I read a lot of like entrepreneurs from Japan, for example. And like I like to just like get a holistic view of entrepreneurship. And I think that's really cool and important because you live in a bubble. Like I'm in San Francisco.
Yeah.
Like I'm surrounded by people trying to raise money for their next unicorn.
Yeah.
Right. And like if I'm just entrenched in that, I'm just going to all these events in San Francisco. Like I don't want to be, I don't want to turn into like an AI, like create, like, you know what I mean? Like I don't want to like get put into this box of like, oh, I'm a San Francisco like person, like all entrepreneur, or whatever. Like I want to be holistic. And so I like to read a lot of books from different countries, like Kazuo Inamori. It's a fantastic Japanese entrepreneur, and he built Kyocera, for example. A lot of these philosophies outside of the US is what's funny is the US has a very almost like egotistical perspective on entrepreneurship. Yeah. Whereas the rest of the country I find is they're more ego-less, like they care more about the team, that the people, doing good in the like for the community. Whereas the US is a little more about like build that $1 thing and like so it's a different way of thinking about it, but it's important to get that holistic experience.
Yeah, I come out about once a year to San Fran. Well, I'll hit you up the next time I'm there. And
Yeah, hit me up.
absolutely, man. It's definitely a different culture to London. In good ways and bad, man. It's definitely different.
Yeah, I'm curious about the London startup world too. So if I go to London, I might hit you up as well. So
Absolutely, man. Well, you're welcome. With lots of spare rooms. Don't get a hotel. Save money. Cool. Awesome to have you on. Good to speak to you. We plugged your stuff as we kind of went along and talked, really. But what's the one
Yeah.
place that people that are still listening should go? Like they finished the episode, where I'll link it right below. But what are they clicking on right now?
Yeah, so I'm pretty active on X/Twitter at Yong-Soo Chung. That's YONGSOOCHUNG. And then you'll see my podcast and newsletter there as well. But you can go to firstclassfounders.com and get all that.
Cool. All right. Thank you for your time. Thank you, everyone, for listening. See ya.
Thanks, Alfie.
Hey, thanks for watching this podcast. Make sure that you like, subscribe, follow, comment, etc., etc. And I'll see you in the next episode.